everyone, and welcome to the Chicago Techies podcast, a podcast focused on highlighting the voices of Chicago Techies and their experiences. I'm your host, CECI Fischer Benitez. Thank you for joining us. On this week's episode, I am joined by Mitch Fischer, software engineer at Innova and board member at Main Street Codes. Hey, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Chicago Techies podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you about your career trajectory as you have, transitioned into tech in this last few years. So I'm excited for people to get to know you. Why don't we start with your name, pronouns, where you're originally from, and your current role.
Hey, CeCi, glad to be here. My name is Mitch Fischer. I'm from Galesburg, Illinois, only a few hours away from Chicago. My pronouns are he, him, and I am currently a software engineer at Innova International.
Awesome. Definitely familiar with Innova, as you know, before. And I've had also Rishab in the show. So he's also shared his perspective. It was really cool listening to his story, and his experience kind of coming from India and his journey in the US. So that was a really cool episode as well. I'm excited for this one because you did a bootcamp and your story is really cool as a theater kid. But I'm not going to spoil everything. I'm just going to let people hear that from you. So I guess to kick that off, let's start with, did you always wanted to end up in tech?
No, not for a career.
Yeah. So what were you studying in school, and what did you want to do back when you were in college?
Well, so when I was younger, I was really big into video games, and I still am, which kind of led into just a really big interest in storytelling. I was a big reader and writer as well. And so I did a lot of acting growing up as well. And so I ended up going to school for theater. I was an acting major. And I had really wanted to do acting. I still love acting. I was briefly after school for a couple of years, I was working in theater administration for Looking Glass Theater here. And so I really, I love theater. It was a really big part of my life, and that's where I was before making the transition into tech, really.
Yeah, that's cool. I also got to see a couple of your shows at ISU, so that was awesome.
The Normal Heart and Alice in Wonderland, maybe? I'm not sure.
Yeah, both of those. Anyway, so I wanna hear more about like your journey, kind of realizing that you wanted to, go into tech, and what sparked that curiosity for you that maybe programming was for you, and kind of like what were those steps that you kind of took before you decided to go into a bootcamp? Yeah,
I think, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, I think a lot of my interest in it comes from storytelling. I again was a really big gamer, and I wanted to make my own video games. So actually, as far back as college, I was messing around a little bit with like building apps. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But I was like following along with some tutorials, using some software to like try and program these like really crappy looking games that I did all the graphics for. And that was not really coding and it was more plot scripting though, and using things like RPG Maker. But I had a really big interest in that. And so after college, I kind of kept pursuing that as a hobby. And while I was at Looking Glass, I decided to look into doing a coding bootcamp. So I did a little prep course with JavaScript, and I fell in love with it. Not JavaScript. I mixed feelings about JavaScript, but in general, programming I was really interested in. And then to top it off, found out how much you can make, which kind of solidified, my curiosity in going to a boot camp and exploring that more.
Absolutely. I feel like the pay the pay in tech is very attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you actually went through the Actualize bootcamp, right?
Yeah. So I went through Actualize, which was a great program. It was 12 weeks long with like 4 weeks of online pre-work beforehand. And I loved it. I couldn't recommend it enough as far as boot camps go. I don't think boot camps are for everyone, but it was necessary for me, and I really learned a lot.
Yeah. What was the pre-work with? Was it with Actualize or was it a different boot camp?
So the course I mentioned before was like it was like a boot camp prep course that I did through Full Stack Academy. And that was like short. That was only like 4 weeks, just to kind of dip your toes in. But then with Actualize, there was a 4-week long, prep work, which was all like just learning basic Ruby, which was cool. Actualize, for those that don't know, Actualize uses Ruby and Ruby on Rails with some JavaScript and Vue front ends. So, you pack a lot in the 12 weeks, but yeah.
Yeah, I've had folks in the podcast that I've talked to that have done the General Assembly bootcamp, which is also a pretty good one, and it's also here in Chicago too. And I feel like Actualize has had a long kind of relationship in the tech community here, being also before, I think it was called Anyone Can Learn to Code before it was rebranded. So about that experience, like how did you have any challenges during that experience? Maybe like thinking maybe this isn't for me, or having just kind of like, a tough time with something. Like what was something that you struggled with?
So, it's really interesting. I had a lot of classmates were going through, we're having some of those thoughts and some of those doubts when I was going through Actualize. I feel like I experienced all of those in that prep course that I did, where I was like probably one of the worst students in the course, because I just did not get it, and I was really struggling to get there. And throughout, like it was a very anxious experience for me. The teachers were all right, but they I don't know. It was like a very stressful experience. And so I left that, being like, because I did learn a lot, but not totally sure if it was for me. But then by the time I started doing Actualize, I feel like I solidified that base a lot more. So it ended up being really important that I took that course, even though it was really, really challenging with Full Stack before Actualize. In general, I don't know. I have like mixed feelings about doing a coding boot camp. I mentioned that, it's not for everyone necessarily. I think like all of the curriculum, anything that you would learn through this course, it's available for free or almost for free, like through a Udemy course or like a digital book or something you can just like download online. But it depends what you're paying for. Like I was paying to be in a classroom full of people and have a place that I had to go to 5 times a week to learn. And also for the camaraderie of, like a classroom. Because I would never have learned this stuff had I tried to learn it on my own. I just never would have gotten there personally. But
yeah, I think I feel like a lot of people would kind of empathize with that. I don't know. I don't think I could also learn a whole chapter or something, or a whole section of one, particular topic without being in a classroom discussion, or at least some type of kind of format setting like that. And kind of to go back to your points about, the stress of of being in a boot camp, or even just that 4-week course. Were there any resources available for students that might have been feeling that kind of stress or some mental health anxieties, or what support do they give you?
In that course, not so much. It was short. Again, that one was like 4 weeks, so it was, we didn't get to know each other that well. If I think back to Actualize, at the 4-week mark, we were just finally starting to know each other's names really well, and like wanting to like hang out before class and after class. And so that was a really important thing, was developing those connections. And for me, it was one of the first times that I had spent that much time with non-theater people in like, I don't know, 6 years, other than like a few gen eds that I was like totally silent in. And so it was a very cool experience. But it was, very different people from what I was used to. In general, we had great, the CEO of Actualize was a great resource. He's a good presence, Jay Wengro. He is a really kind guy, and wanted to give everyone the support that he could. And Josh Nixon was our teacher, and he was really great as well. And he was also a former theater guy. So, I mean, there were people that you could go to and that you could say, hey, I'm really struggling. I need more resources, or I need more time or something. In general, that's what really attracted me to Actualize, was that it seemed like a community of people that like wanted to be around each other.
Yeah, I bet that's super important, especially for for someone that is kind of like new to the entire ecosystem of what is tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm actually really curious to know your thoughts on how you felt when you started noticing these groups, right? Like you're coming in new, like know nothing about tech. And you're seeing that obviously it's dominated by white males. So what were kind of some of your initial reactions as you went through the boot camp and like kind of got familiar with like the tech ecosystem? Like what did you think?
Well, it's kind of interesting because and again, this is a podcast, so I'm a white male, but I'm bi, and that was not surprising to like people in theater. Like everyone was queer in theater, not everyone, but I mean that was nothing not normal, and so that was not something that you it didn't feel like you were entering a new environment in theater and defaulting to straight, and so. I mean, I remember feeling like, I think for like half of my time at Actualize, feeling like I was back in the closet, which was, I don't know, because, like people would ask, like, are you married? Are you dating anyone? Or I don't know. And, there's that's a bigger conversation too, but the idea that you feel like you're hiding something because of people making assumptions. But yeah, so that was challenging. It was a totally different group of people, all generally like lovely people that we developed some really nice friendships.
Yeah, I think kind of to go along with that, I felt similar. But I mean, you already know me. Like I am very much like proud of who I am and I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So that was never really something that I like bothered me. I think what bothered me most though is in like, I guess being like the only person of color in the room was a little like obviously hard not to notice. And I always kind of questioned if like the people that were in front of me noticed too. Obviously like a majority of them were like white people. And I always wondered if like what they thought, like if they even like made that like they put the 2 and 2 together, if they like recognize that there's like not a lot of women even in like tech.
Yeah.
But I was just like curious if you had any like thoughts about all of that, like even just not necessarily about sexuality, but also like about women in general. Were there like any women in your cohort?
Definitely, but absolutely in the minority. I think there were probably, it was a big class. It was, I think like 15 or 16. And I think there were like 4 women. And like the community in general is already, you're talking about like, if that's the minority, everyone else, the kind of jokes that they're making, the kind of like, sometimes the conversation can turn to things that is very exclusionary and that makes people feel like they're not included. And so I mean, definitely, you know, and I know personally, like I don't recognize when, you know, I'm in a room full of people that look like me. I don't really totally realize that it can feel super lonely for someone else until I'm the only, you know, queer person in a room full of straight people. And then I realize, you know, that's a unique experience and it feels kind of lonely, and there's definitely a separation there.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's definitely important to share and like talk about the things that we see in front of us, right? Um, so now I'm curious about like your trajectory as you were like kind of navigating from being in this boot camp to trying to find your first role, or at least like either an internship or a fellowship or something.
Yeah.
What was that like? What did like? Did you attend meetups? Did you attend like workshops? What was that like? I guess awkward networking phase. You know, when you're done with the boot camp and trying to get a role.
Oh, yeah, lots of like odd jobs and things. I yeah, so Actualize was, and again, this is a big reason that I like that I would recommend it, is because it didn't just stop at the end of the course. They had an apprenticeship following it, where students would continue like working together to like work on like projects and stuff. Most of what we did during the course was individual work. So the ability to work with working groups, work with Git, version control, and just working on you know, meeting each other's coding standards. It was a really cool experience. So I was doing that apprenticeship for a little while, and then I got an internship with a startup that ended up. It ended up being like, it was an unpaid internship, which I was used to in theater. In general, I think I think it's really not okay to not pay people for their work. And so after like 2 months of that internship, I actually stopped doing it just because it was 40 hours a week, unpaid. You got stock in the company, but you would lose your stock if you didn't stay for 2 years. And there was no assurance that the startup was going anywhere. And so that's a trap right away. You know, I mean, like when you're starting out, there's, you know, I think you should be more open and willing to like take opportunities that maybe sometimes don't look the best, but you'll learn something and grow from that. But that was, you know, that's not okay to treat people that way, to you know, just have like people fresh out of boot camps trading their labor for nothing. So I did that for like 2 months, 3 months maybe. And then I actually talked to Jay at Actualize, started working as a TA for one of their online courses, which was a cool experience, and kind of moved that into a summer teaching gig that was like sort of affiliated with Actualize, but it was like kind of separate with a separate school. So yeah, it was a weird, you know, lots of just little, you know, opportunities, one hopping to the next, but learned a lot. You know, I've got some friends that went straight into a like software engineer role after that, or an apprenticeship, and it was I took my time getting around to it.
Yeah, so which this is actually a great segue into like the next phase of what it is, your trajectory.
Yeah.
You and your brother, so my two brother-in-laws, you guys started a boot camp in your hometown of Galesburg, Illinois, called Main Street Codes.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like?
Yeah. So Jamie, my brother, he is our brother. He is another developer in Chicago, and he was wanting to start a coding boot camp in our hometown. Our hometown is like, you know, this is an education that is like largely restricted to urban areas. If you're not going through a university, or if you're not doing online education, that's just like the nature of of the education of these boot camps really is that they're going to be in urban places where they can like, just like put out talent that is able to like network right away with companies that exist there. And so I moved, so Jamie needed a teacher to be there and to start this. And I was just coming out of a teaching assistant gig. And then I had taught a course in like front end development that summer, the summer before that. And so, yeah, I moved back to Galesburg to sort of get this off the ground and teach these courses. And I was also like acting as a community manager. I had been working before that in when I was at Looking Glass, doing like nonprofit administration and fundraising and stuff. So it was a cool experience to kind of like take that nonprofit experience and pair it with software development. So I was able to help build a nonprofit from the ground up and also teach these coding courses. It was a cool experience. I ended up doing it for a year. Yeah, I'm still affiliated with it, moved on in a board member capacity. And so I still am like working on projects with some alumni. We're a large focus of Main Street Codes has shifted towards doing community driven work. So working with local businesses that don't necessarily have this kind of talent, web developers and mobile app developers like readily available. And so we've been kind of partnering with them and trying to get our alumni hooked up with them to, just like build these projects and kind of close that digital divide in non-urban America.
Oh yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I wanted to touch on, the importance of like rural opportunities, right? Like being able to kind of build, I guess, better lives for people that are looking to have these kind of like skills now. I feel like now those graduates that came out of like Main Street Codes are able to build websites now for their local restaurants or any local organizations that, can help the economy there. What are your thoughts on that kind of work?
Well, so having done some of that work, I can say that for like freelance stuff is tough because you're never really done. And when you're doing these projects, a business owner doesn't want to like have especially a small business owner doesn't want to have like a web developer on retainer, and like have to pay them every time they need an HTML update on their site. They would rather like go with WordPress or something with that. So there are lots of sacrifices you need to make when you're doing freelancing, knowing that the relationship isn't going to be totally over with this business once you're done with like version 1 of what they wanted. But it's definitely a great way to get started in a career and to sort of build a portfolio, learn a lot, and develop some good connections with people in the community. That said, I do think, the world is very different now than it was 6 months ago when it comes to remote opportunities. That this is something that, like potentially one of the benefits on the other side of COVID, whenever that may be, that we might see, more of a desire to hire like rural talent when it comes to these opportunities. If you're a company operating in Chicago or like San Francisco, if you can pay like wages that are significantly less for developers that would still be making so much more in a small town in rural America, why not do that? Because you're also, you're putting money into places that really need it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think it's so important. Ultimately, our goal with Main Street Codes is not to, necessarily hook up like these alumni with like freelancing positions as much as it is like we want them to be able to live in Galesburg and work wherever they want and get paid well for it.
Yeah. And all of this reminds me of a conversation that I had with a recruiter at Grace Hopper. last year, and I'm pretty sure, or I think it was that conference. It might have been another conference, but they were from Moline, from John Deere. I think they have now this technical like engineering team that are, you know, basically building all their products, all the tech products, and it's growing, and they're exponentially. So they're really looking for talent, and I'm like, what? Like you're recruiting in Florida? Like you obviously have, you know, a ton of, like a huge pool like of people, and if you're over here, obviously you're telling me that there's not a lot of like technical talent in those rural areas where John Deere operates and where the engineer is. But I feel like now, like Main Street Codes and, you know, other smaller boot camps around, like in the area, could now potentially feed into these companies.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I try to advocate for as much as I can is let's hire people from boot camps. Like, why are we having so many hesitations about that? So that's one of the things that is really frustrating to me, you know, I guess as a tech advocate, because I'm not technical, but I definitely have a lot of friends that are going through these boot camps and trying to change their lives and do different things and help the world. And I feel like they're just as important as someone that holds a 4-year degree in computer science. So that's kind of like something that I always find myself not really understanding why, like there's that hesitation. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that, you know, you coming from a boot camp, you've also kind of had these, you know, strong opinions.
You know, it's a risk for a company to hire a boot camp grad. It's a bigger risk than to hire someone with a computer science degree. That said, you know, we've seen, and this is just my nonprofit side, nonprofit hat, that we've seen such a bigger push for like corporate sustainability, for corporate giving in the nonprofit world, that if we can think about hiring and cultivating talent in the same scope, if we can think about, you know, maybe your job as a company is not only to you know, give back to your community financially, but it's also to develop new workers, and to take chances on them, because we're looking at this is my soapbox moment. We're looking at an increasingly polarized country. A lot of that is split down economic lines. You look at where the opportunities are and where it isn't, and where they aren't. And it really is a divide between urban and non-urban areas. It's really important, you know, as we approach automation, the automated age is like upon us, and that is going to be really bad for a lot of people in the Midwest that have jobs that are going to be automated. And hopefully, you know, we can move into that incrementally, but if we trust corporate judgment to do that, then it's going to be all at once, and it's going to put a lot of people out of work, because you can make a lot of money off automating. And so I think it is really important that, you know, we think about that, like recruiting and hiring, not just in the scope of like what's a risk for our company, but also what do we owe the society that we're operating in, when it comes to making a better world.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually like at least glad that Innova had that program, I guess, that would kind of fill in that need of bringing in more junior talent coming fresh out of boot camps and creating that apprenticeship program. I am actually a really big fan of apprenticeship programs. I think that really gives, you know, the idea to a candidate that that they care about who comes in through the door, and no matter what the skill level is.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, maybe the skill level does matter a little bit, but that kind of gives me a little hope. So I like that. And you actually went through that. That was you went through an apprenticeship program at Innova, and now have converted into a full-time engineer.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about how kind of like you felt as you went through that, like kind of I guess time of unsure, like if you were going to like be hired on, or like what was that like for you?
Well, I have to say, like, one of my big, just as a precursor to that, one of my biggest reasons that I I stopped teaching at Main Street Codes, and I moved back to Chicago was because I wanted some community, some like a more, I felt like I had been learning in a void a little bit, and wanted that like mentorship, wanted to be surrounded by coworkers that were like continuing to learn, that I could learn from. And so my experience at the apprenticeship was, I was like blown away a little bit at how brilliant the people were around me, which at times was amazing. And at times it was really intimidating. And so you never know when it comes to like an apprenticeship program. There's no assurance that you're going to be hired. I love that they did it. The apprenticeship program, but also I love that they hired me. But I don't know. I think programs like that are so important, for taking a risk on people, and letting them, like learn and get paid to learn, and prove themselves. And so ultimately I was really excited at the opportunity to prove myself, in a room like full of people that were smarter than me. And then in April of this year, I finally moved to software engineer, which is really exciting because that's been a journey in the making for a little while. Like I said, lots of like odd jobs and stuff. So I don't know, loving it. Really challenging, learn something new every day. And I like the people I work with.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that's like the general analysis, right? You always learn something new every day. And if you're not learning something new every day, that's probably not the best place for you.
Yeah.
Because tech is definitely evolving every single day, and there are always going to be new things and new challenges. But yeah, I really appreciate that part of tech too. Even being in a non-technical role, in the community, in the tech community, there are so many people, like smart people are everywhere. They're incredibly talented. I feel like I share the similar thoughts on that when I was working at Innova, and when I was working, and now that I'm working at Code for America, I am surrounded by incredible people. And you're right, it can be really intimidating, but you just have to remind yourself that you were there for a reason. And that's because you were also incredible. So, yeah. So
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Ultimately, that's what you wanted, like, or at least that's what I tell myself. You wanted to be surrounded by people that made you better, and that taught you more.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's overwhelming sometimes.
I concur. So now looking back a little bit toward this experience, that you've had now a few years of progress in your belt, like looking back, what advice would you share with someone that may be thinking about a coding bootcamp?
I would say, I think it's really important to, again, like I mentioned, I did that 4-week full stack course. Actualize and other boot camps like it are billed as like anyone can do it. You can start at 0, and that's great. And I think that is true. But what it doesn't say is that it expects you to be really good really fast if you're coming in from 0. And so I would say, just the simplest thing, reading some technical material, taking a Udemy course. Those like Udemy courses have been a incredible resource, like $10, and you can learn how to build fucking like like Tinder in React Native, which is amazing. You can learn how to build a weather app in 2 hours and deploy it to the App Store if you wanted to. And so, I mean, like, doing one of those courses is going to put you astronomically ahead of the, I mean, and it's not, it's not competitive, but it is going to put you ahead if you do a coding boot camp. And ultimately, like, you're paying a lot of money for something 12, 13 weeks. And so if even one of those weeks is wasted on you being confused or not really understanding what you're working on, then you're not getting your money's worth. So I don't know, I would say do something free beforehand. Code Academy is like totally free. I think there's like a premium version, but you can, a lot of these sites give you almost all of their content for free and ask you to pay them money. But I don't know. It's, I would definitely recommend Code Academy, Udemy, and then just like some simple like tutorials if you're a reader.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I feel like, to go back to your point about not getting your money's worth if you're just confused. I feel like that's the one thing that people are afraid to do, advocating for themselves. So don't do that. Like, ask questions, like, you get your money's worth, like you said, like, these people are there to help you. They're being paid to help you learn a new skill.
And, I am terrible at asking questions. I'm like one of those students that, like, I definitely was terrible in school and in college. And then when I was like pretty good at coding, I was like, great, I don't need to ask questions anymore. I get this stuff. And then, I'll run into something where I'm like totally confused. And because I haven't been like because I haven't been advocating for myself, it's like a very foreign thing. As a student and as, a teacher of like a couple courses, I will say there's no such thing as a dumb question, but your dumb question week 1 is 12 times dumber week 12. Because, I mean, every week that goes by without you clarifying something, you're building on more confusion. You're just building layers and layers of not understanding on top of things that you already didn't understand. And so it's so important to do that early. And I say that also, I should take my own advice more just in my daily work. But, you learn and you grow.
Cool. Well, this has been really illuminating, and I really appreciate our conversations. Now, this actually, Gabby, your sister, which happens to be my wife, suggested that I incorporate a new question into this podcast, or I'm going to follow her suggestions. So this question comes from Gabby. What has been one of your go-to resources, like whether that's a book, a blog, or a podcast, that kind of has influenced your career as you move through the tech industry?
So I would say I have a lot of technical books that I have that I've started and haven't finished. The only one that I think I've actually finished, which is, I think, like heralded by a lot of people as like one of the greatest web development books, especially Rails web development. It's just called The Rails Tutorial by Michael Hartle. It is a great, really quick deep dive into Rails. It's way cheaper than a boot camp. And you can move through it really fast. It's kind of a big book, but most of it's code. And it's also available digitally. And like is free or was free up until like digitally up until maybe the last few months, but I think the older versions are still. And so it really like introduces you to a different, like a new way of like thinking. It's written for someone coming into software development from literally nothing. It doesn't require you to like know Ruby that much. It will teach you a little bit of Ruby as you go, but ultimately that.
So I just to get a sense of kind of like what your interests are for the future. Like, what are your goals for the future? Like, what's next for Mitch?
So this is like I would love to be a video game developer. I like just have fun for work. I see myself owning my own company one day, whether or not that's just me in my apartment, developing things. That actually sounds pretty nice. But the idea of like maintaining an app or developing like retro RPGs just as an indie game developer, I think would be really cool. And that's actually a lot of what I'm like spending my free time doing, is like working on video game development, trying to learn that. And just I think that there's so much stuff you can do with that, but I would really like to pursue that for a career.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like maybe what timeline, 10, 15 years, maybe we can work together. I'll be your chief diversity officer, whatever you want me to do, I'm down.
Do it.
Yeah, so now I do want to give the opportunity for people to connect with you, whether that's LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever you want to feel comfortable sharing. How can people connect with you?
Probably LinkedIn. I don't know, like maybe like include a little message like, hey, I listened to this and I would like to be connected, because I'm totally down. I have like 1,400 connections and 1,300 of them are people I don't actually know or recognize their photos at all. So yeah, I would say LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I don't know how to use Twitter, so I don't know.
You're just in there, but you figure it out.
Really figuring it out. We're in that phase, so.
Yeah. Well, I will put those links in the show notes so that people can get access to those. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mitch. This is it. Thanks so much for coming to the show. This is really fun. I'm really glad we got a chance to chat.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Chicago Techies podcast. If you enjoyed listening, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review on iTunes. Let's continue the conversation on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us at Chicago Techies on all social media channels. Thank you again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.